Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. So much controversy and a lot of deception.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? This is your brother Shabazz. Please, you will have to forgive me because I am suffering from an illness at this point in time, but I felt like maybe I have enough energy still in me to get a couple of things off my chest. As you can see from the title, the BAFTA glitch, why the N-word stayed, but Palestine was cut. That's what we're talking about this afternoon. As long as I got enough energy to stay up on here. So, hotep to the Pan-African world, and let's get this thing started. I'm sure you've seen the news. I'm sure you've seen the videos. And here's my thoughts. Yeah, the world is calling it a glitch. Now, what you might refer to as the glitch, that might need some teasing out, but clearly at the 2026 BAFTAs, John Davidson stole the show. Yes, that man whose life inspired the movie I Swear. He shouted the N-word at Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo. That's not the only people he shouted it at, but that was the live version of it, what you saw on the screen. Now, some would say, let's slow this down. We need to have a sober understanding of what took place. It's just coprolalia. It's a neurological short circuit. There was no malice. There's no racism. This is just a scientific, unfortunate incident. Now, I'm not disputing the science. I said to someone else, if you don't know about Tourette's and coprolalia, if you don't understand Tourette syndrome and coprolalia, then please make sure you educate yourself before you spaz off in your own ignorance. And that's not what this is about today. This is not about throwing people who have this condition under the bus. I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to co-sign the people that said they shouldn't show up and things of that nature. But I do have an issue. I do have a question. Because science doesn't necessarily explain what appears to be the targeting. Now, John Davidson was vocal all night. He called the BAFTA chair, Sarah Putt, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. He yelled out, boring, towards her. He yelled out, F you, at the winners for Best Children's Film. Now, so clearly, it wasn't an isolated situation that night. Now, clearly, these were generalized insults. So there still has to be some kind of accounting. Because the second he saw black skin, something else happened. Now, I'm not offering this as a scientific explanation. That's not what I'm not capable. I don't have that type of a background. I'm not studied in that. But something in his brain switched to racial violence. That is clear. Now, I don't speak to what was in his heart, but it certainly seems as though he saved the N-word specifically for the melanated humans at the event. Michael B. Jordan, Delroy Lindo, and backstage, he had a choice encounter with the legendary production designer, Hannah Beachler. And he hurled the N word at her too. So if it's just noise, like some would have us believe, why didn't he call any white presenters the N word? Why didn't he accost any white presenters with this word? Or rather yet, since we know that there are slurs in the English lexicon for all groups, like we know that some people might refer to Caucasian folks as white devils, but that didn't enter John Davidson's vocabulary that night. So even in a medical episode, it seems as though the subconscious is navigating in a racial hierarchy. Yeah, like a guided missile. Now, I've been told that I need to give space. We've been told we need to give space. We've been told let cooler heads prevail. Let's look at this from a less emotionally charged perspective. Well, I will say this. I recognize, I am fully aware that the reporting confirms that Davidson himself told CNN before the ceremony that he was worried about involuntary tics. In fact, a BAFTA floor manager warned the audience before the show began that Davidson has Tourette's and they might hear involuntary noises. I think that word noises is a bit misleading. So I don't deny the fact that apparently, or at least according to the reporting, his brain was already in a high stimulus environment before any black presenters appeared on stage. Okay, I understand that. And I give grace. I give space for that. And some might say that is a more precise version of the guided missile argument that I referenced. They'll say it's not that he targeted black skin consciously. They'll say that it's not. They'll say that it's not that he targeted black skin subconsciously. They'll say that the slur was already sitting in the cultural arsenal as the sharpest available weapon. They'll say society loaded the gun. It was his Tourette's syndrome that pulled the trigger. Now, that's not a defense of Davidson per se. That's more technically an indictment of the culture that put that word like a bullet in the chamber in the first place. So that's what they would have us end with. That's what they would have us carry the load for. But I'm going to go a little bit further. However, if you think that's where it should end, if you think that's where it should stop, let me know. Say something in the comments. Leave a comment and tell me that's all that this was. But I'm going to move a little bit further than that. Now, I've seen some people say in vino veritas. And I don't know if that's an appropriate statement or not. But I would say I would rather, if I were going to lean into that idea, the idea that when your guard is down, the truth comes out, then I would say it the way my ancestors from the Akan family tree would say it. And they would say, Insamu na no kwa rewo. Now, I'm sorry if I said it wrong. Insamu na no kwa rewo. Just like in vino veritas, in wine comes truth, or out of wine comes truth, out of wine comes truth. In alcohol, there is truth. Now, in Swahili, they would say, Imleyi. Oh, no, I said that wrong. Imlevi, husema, yaliyo moyoni. Imleyi, Imlevi, husema, yaliyo moyoni. Now, loosely translated into one who is filled with the Spirit speaks what is in the heart. So there's this thing about the glitch. The glitch didn't invent the word, though. The word was already in the moyo, in the ka, and in the ba of the culture at the very least, if not the man, the heart. His brain latched onto it because society taught him it was the ultimate weapon. So again, there is that to be thought of, to consider. It is definitely a cultural trigger word. But if we're going to give grace, if we're going to give space for the man who has the syndrome, then let's look at the producers and the tangled web that they wove. It was a 2-hour tape delay. Now, the BBC Chief Content Officer, Kate Phillips, claimed that they didn't hear it from the truck where they were stationed and positioned to do the edits. Okay, that sounds like an innocent statement. But all the way outside of the building in the truck, they were sharp enough to edit out Akinola Davies Jr. when he mentioned Free Palestine. You heard that. You didn't hear the N-word, but you heard Free Palestine. You were surgical enough to cut a joke out about Donald Trump because you wanted to appear impartial. And you even bleeped out director Paul Thomas Anderson when he used just a regular standard swear word. So you can hear a call for a ceasefire and delete it in seconds. But you just so happen to miss the racial slur directed at black men and a black woman. Well, directed at black men because that's the one that was heard all around the world. You edited out the politicalization. You edited out the humanity of the people who live in Gaza. But you kept the dehumanization of the black people who were on stage. And you call this entertainment? Now I know the cooler heads are whispering in my ear. They will say something like this. Now, the more precise and frankly even more damning version of this argument is that the Trump joke reference may need a closer look. What the BBC actually cut was Alan Cumming making a joke comparing Zootopia 2's plot to the current US political climate. Same principle, politically coded speech, surgically removed. That's what I would say. Now, there's something even more explosive hiding in plain sight. A BBC insider told Deadline before the ceremony that the network was on specific high alert for political speech. So what does this mean? This was a direct institutional response to, okay, earlier there was, at another event, there was someone who shouted out, "Death to the IDF." And that was a controversy at Glastonbury. So they were primed. They were charged up to hit the delete button or hit the mute button or something. They had a checklist. Free Palestine was on the list. You ain't allowed to say that. But nobody thought, let's make sure that the N word goes on the list. So it wasn't a mistake. So it wasn't a glitch. This is a documented institutional priority statement. They told you exactly who they chose to protect, who they plan to protect, and who they plan not to protect. Now let's move into if we get a little closer to, like, I have been trying to I want to put that man on the shelf and say, leave the guy with Tourette's syndrome, leave him alone. But here's the thing. He has Tourette's syndrome. And he was, the movie was, the brothers was announcing an award for his movie. Now, in his movie, I Swear, that's the name of his movie. Now, he wasn't in it. His role was played by an actor by the name of Robert Aramayo. But in the movie, they don't use the N-word. Director Kirk Jones and the producers knew that, or apparently they knew, some would argue that they knew, that if the protagonist of their 90-minute film was bopping up and down, screaming the N-word, they knew no one would buy a ticket. So perhaps they sanitized this disability to protect their profits. I don't know. Because so far the storyline seems to be that it is not necessarily a word in his normal list. Now I know. I have read up on it. I have been made aware that you can gain a new tick at the drop of a dime at any moment. So it could be that it was never in his vocabulary until that night. That still doesn't erase the impact. Now, at the end of the day, I still feel real comfortable saying the heart is that which is in the body. The heart is that which speaks. Now, really, what I'm trying to say is ab puenti kahet. Ab puenti kahet. That's an ancient Kemetic phrase that says, in some way, fashion, form, or another, what is truly inside you always finds a way to come out. Now, the heart of the film industry, perhaps they were cowardly. Perhaps they chose not to include those examples in the film. And perhaps they did that for safety and for profits. Perhaps they created a safe version of John Davidson for the box office. But even if that's the case, they let the raw version insult Black people on the world stage. So they're all guilty. They used our trauma as a Trojan horse to get the movie trending. Because otherwise, aside from hearing about the movie from these two Black men standing on stage, were we going to go? Did we even know about this movie? So that's my question. If you agree or disagree, let me know. Drop something in the comments. But before I get out of here, because it is almost time for me to take some more medicine, let me say this. because they came out and they said that they chose to leave it in because they wanted to educate the audience. Well, what audience? Who are you educating exactly? Because every black person, we all black people, we well educated on this thing. I'll tell you what we learned. If you want to say education was at the heart of this, we learned that the BBC, we learned that BAFTA, or at the very least, the BAFTA CEO, Jane Millichip, we learned that they value viral moments and not black dignity. You don't foster inclusion by putting black actors in the line of fire and then telling them to understand the science. And unless I'm wrong, even up to now, because it's been a couple of days, they still haven't issued any significant, real apology, not to the audience, not to the actors, not to the set designer, not to anyone. So if you can edit out politics, why can't you edit out trauma? Why can't you edit out racism? Because you don't want to. So I would just say until the truck, since they wanted to put it on the personnel in the truck, well, until the truck starts hearing our pain as clearly as they can hear Free Palestine, well, maybe you don't deserve our grace. Now, I do think it also interesting that most coverage is leading with Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo. But do not be confused. Because he also, as I said earlier, he also directed this ugliness, this racism. I still understand that it is a tic, but it was directed at Hannah Beachler. And then reporting says there was another unnamed black woman that said she encountered the same. Now, Beachler herself said the apology was a throwaway. She's the Oscar-winning Black Panther production designer. So when I say legendary, I mean legendary. She is a living, breathing, walking amongst us right now legend. And everybody is treating her like she's a footnote in her own trauma. So as much as this is about Michael B. Jordan, as much as this is about Delroy Lindo, this is about that black woman. This is about Hannah Beachler. So this is about all of us. And the BBC and all of their apologetics and all of their apologizers, they chose who to center. They chose what side to stand on. Now the choice is up to us. Now, before I get out of here, I am going to say a couple of things. Let me put a few choice brothers on the screen. My good friend Kevin, aka Mr. K, is here. I hope my voice don't sound too crazy because I am definitely under the weather. Greetings to the Pan-African Terminator. That's what Kevin, aka Mr. K, says. So greetings to you, peace. He says, unfortunately, the FBA are using this to instigate the diaspora wars, basically blaming Black Brits for not standing up to racism enough for those two FBA actors to be disrespected like they did. Shaking my head. Yeah, at this point in the game, we just have to be cognizant of the fact that the FBA COINTELPRO squad is going to take any and every opportunity to flex their propaganda. Cooler heads will prevail. Sober minds will prevail. They can get their shots off. But for the most part, they're shooting blanks. They may get a spike in their algorithm, but they're shooting blanks for long term. So I'm gonna leave you with that. And I'm gonna get ready to get out of here. I appreciate everybody for listening. I appreciate everybody for participating and joining me in this beleaguered broadcast. And please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. I would say I'm coming back live tonight, but I don't know, because once I take this next round of medicine, I may be over there in Snoozeville. But ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this has been your brother Shabazz. I appreciate you for listening. And like I said, if you think I have gone too far, if you think I haven't gone far enough, then let me know in the comment section. And I will see you guys on the next one. So with that, I'm gonna get up out of here and say peace.